But that's another fabulous one too, so, just so you know.
And we are.
I feel like I'm being cheated.
We'll just wait for Michelle to get back before we start the meeting. And then I'll also remind everybody, if you don't need to speak, you can single tap to your microphone to mute it. Stay within a couple feet so that it's clear for everybody that is online.
Let the cookies get stuck in front of me. Michelle said she didn't want them in front of her. Give back to their owner.
Thank you so much.
That's a dangerous thing. That's what Kathy said there.
Feel free to proceed.
Well, thank you very much. Okay, with that being said, let's please call this meeting to order. Please stand for the pledge of allegiance. Pledge of allegiance
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Roll call, please.
Trustee Polly,
Present.
Trustee Lappin,
Here.
Clerk Palovich here, Treasurer Ellery Summers. Here. Trustee Kroll,
Here.
Trustee Reiner,
Here.
Supervisor Skibby.
Here. Moving forward to the adoption of the agenda. Is there any additions, subtractions, or corrections to the agenda that is presented? Yes.
I'd like to know if we, to add this to the agenda about something for the planning commission about a secretary, or should we do that in discussion?
We can open it as potential new business. So I'd like to add new business number 4. We'll just list it as planning commission secretary, just for discussion's sake. Are there any other additions, corrections, or subtractions to the amended agenda as presented? If not, I'll entertain a motion to adopt the amended agenda.
I'll make that motion.
Support.
We have a motion and support. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor of adopting the amended agenda signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Oppose the same? Agenda adopted. This is the first opportunity for public comment. If you are by telephone, please state your name for the minutes. Now I'll ask online. Is there any public comment by telephone? If so, please state your name for the record. Hearing and seeing no public comment at this moment, we will continue forward to the minutes that are presented of
Payment of
January.
bills.
Oh, yes, sorry. Please, payment of bills. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Do we have a motion to make payment of the bills? I do believe that the sheet has made its way around.
Yep. Motion to make payment of bills.
We have a motion on the table to make payment of bills. Is there support?
Or
It's been moved and supported. Any further discussion? Seeing none, roll call, please.
Clerk Palovich, yes. Treasurer Ellery Summers.
Yes.
Trustee Kroll,
Yes.
Trustee Reiner,
Yes.
Trustee Polly,
Yes.
Trustee Lappin,
Yes.
Supervisor Skibby.
Yes. Okay, thank you. Moving forward in the agenda to the minutes of January 21st, budget session, January 25th, a regular meeting, and February 2nd, a budget session. Do we have a motion to approve the minutes of the 3 meetings presented?
So moved.
We have a motion on the table to approve the minutes of all 3 meetings. Is there support?
Support.
It's been moved and supported. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor of approving the minutes signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, the same. All the minutes have been approved. Moving forward to to old business. Fire department ad hoc.
Correspondence.
Oh, jeez.
Let me help you
You're
today.
getting closer. I have been up for a considerable period of time. Correspondence, all of which trustee Foley are from the road commission. And this is the first day, FYI, Bacon Street Bridge is closed.
Second day.
Second.
The second day?
Yeah.
Yeah, I stayed away from it on the 8th because I didn't know. So, do we have a motion to receive and file the correspondence as such from the road commission?
So moved.
I'll make that motion.
We have a motion on the table by Foley,
Support.
support by trustee Lappin. And now, the whole business, the fire department.
Are you going to have a voice vote?
All those in favor of receiving and filing the correspondence as presented, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, the same. Received and filed, all business.
Correspondence. We received and filed correspondence.
Correspondence, and now
Oh,
on.
okay, all right.
Now you're making self-doubt. You deserve it. So the old business, fire department ad hoc committee, trustee Lappin, trustee Kroll, do you want to start discussion?
I'll let Cash start with some of the information that he has, and then we can go into just some general discussion on that.
So, you know, we spent a considerable amount of time going through the budget. Made some changes, got it as lean as we can. I think the committee can speak a little more to it, what's gone into it and how we got to where we're at. I think there are some issues that down the road maybe we can address, maybe to even see more savings or change the way we do some operation things. Obviously, some of it will have to be bargained and that type of stuff. But I think at this point, when I do the figures, we're roughly about $800,000 budget, not including
What was that figure?
800,000. Not including future equipment purchases, the current contract agreement with the city. Anything else?
I don't think so. Now, the big ticket items that were difficult to assess out of the current budget is the city's agreement with us. So what we basically did is the budget that you have that we submitted shows 7 full-time people and the associated expenses with 7 full-time people. And it also has a line item in there for the balance of the city contract. So it's skewed because we wouldn't, if we have a full staff, we wouldn't need the city's contribution. And without a full staff, we still need some of the city's contribution. So coming up with an absolute dollar amount, and you guys can kick in anytime you feel you need to, we probably wouldn't completely know that answer for, I would say, a year from now. And so this budget that you see would certainly have some fat in it, simply by the nature of the way we had to set it up. If that makes sense.
Any questions thus far for trustee Kroll or Lappin?
Am I stating that right, guys?
Sure. And by all means, as trustee Lappin stated, if you would like to go one by one, introduce yourself to the remainder of the board, if you haven't been known by the board thus far, and give us a synopsis of the services that you provided the township through this process, and maybe potentially answer some questions. Ms. Banks?
Oh, ladies first.
Ladies first.
I am Beverly Banks of Alpena Township. I volunteered to be on this committee because there were a lot of questions that were not answered. I feel that the community was a large part of saying, hey, wait a minute, let's look at every avenue. Have I learned a lot of things that I did not know and understand prior to this point in time? Absolutely. Boo koodles, for a lack of any other word. Do I understand now, too, that there was a lot of areas that lacked attention through this whole process, and it appears for quite a long time that there was lack of attention. I'm very thankful for the opportunity and that I could learn a lot more about all of this process. Do I think that there is still a ton of work to do? I absolutely do. Do I 100% back this department? Absolutely. Most people who know me getting up at 6 o'clock in the morning is not my favorite. I hate mornings. I really hate mornings. So dedicating at least 3 hours every Monday and every Thursday that I volunteered my time to go through this, I'm fighting for this department, and I think that we should fight for this department. The services that we provide as a township fire department are extremely critical to our infrastructure. 32 years in healthcare. I have a master's degree. I am working on my PhD. I think I'm very qualified to be very concerned about the healthcare structure of our community, and they are part of our healthcare infrastructure. So I'm willing to keep going and do what I can do within my power, and hopefully everyone is doing everything within their power to see the success of this department. Any questions?
I do. You said areas that lack attention and have lacked attention, it sounded like I guess what areas exactly are you referring to?
That is a very, very complicated question, Michelle. It is.
I will agree that everything to do with the fire department is very complicated.
Yes, very, very much so. So to actually single out and say that, it would be an easy synopsis to say, well, this lacked attention, this lacked attention, this lacked attention. What I can say right now, and I have not talked one-on-one with any of the other trustees except for Cash and Steve. What I can say 100%, do I feel that their knowledge base has grown to an exceptional magnitude prior to all of this process? Yes. So would that be a fair statement to say that prior to this coming to a head, that there was a lack of attention to exactly really and truthfully what went on? There's a possibility that there was a lack of attention. So it really is a lot of areas in my mind that possibly could have. There's the fact of everyone working together for the common goal would be something that I think that we are driving much better down the road with that kind of an idea. Does that help a little bit?
A bit. It
Okay.
helps a bit.
I mean, really and truthfully, like I said, for the hours and hours that we really have sat there as an ad hoc committee, there would be hours and hours to sit down with you to actually explain the intricacies and the things that, oh, didn't know that. Oh, didn't know that. I have learned a lot about the board and a lot of the efforts and work that you have done learning things, and the work that you have done, I believe is at BSNA, that you have brought a lot of things up to speed that were even before your time that really and truthfully complicated a lot of things. So, I mean, I want to give you credit and say thank you for what you have, and now you got a little bit more of a support team to try and help, because it is a monster, to say the least. Any other questions?
Any other trustees have questions for Ms. Banks?
You mentioned BSNA complicated a lot of things. How did you do that?
No, I said it, I meant that it uncomplicated a lot of things.
Okay.
Any other questions for Ms. Banks?
And I think what she means by that is, since we've come on with the SNA, I think it's been a lot easier to see where we were deficient or where money was being spent. So our tracking capabilities have come a long way since we put that in place. So, the information prior was not as reliable. And I think it's much more better tracked now than it ever was, so.
I would definitely agree with that, Cash. I mean, there's plenty of times that I sit there and we get frustrated, so I can just imagine prior to that point the levels of frustration.
There's been a lot of levels of frustration
I-
trying to dig back and research things.
Sure, absolutely. When you get something laid in your lap, sometimes it's really difficult to pick up the pieces.
Are there any other questions for Ms. Banks? If not, as I formally mentioned, thank you very much
Yeah,
for your
thanks,
time.
Bob. Thank you.
Mr. Evans?
Chad Ash, Alpena Township resident. To expand on the confusion or the lack of what she was saying, the absolute necessity of immediately implementing CIPs, capital improvement projects, in the township budget, that has to be this budget year. It can't wait next year. I sat on the DDA for the city for 12 years, and every single year the budget process consisted of CIPs. The fire truck that is on the payment plan, ridiculous. We need to eliminate that. We all know that and I'm embarrassed, when I first went into the South Side Station, we need $100 to paint a couple of walls in that place. It's embarrassing to have that type of stuff in a township this size. The CIP stuff, general maintenance stuff is general maintenance, but the CIPs, we've talked about needing more fire trucks, we've got ambulances, all of those things you have to be preparing for. The one thing that I have learned, this township doesn't have any capital improvement projects on the docket ever in the past. That's embarrassing as a township in 2021. The budgeting system that you have in place now is going to help with all of that stuff. You need to start setting money aside. That's the one thing that I learned just tremendously in the hours and hours and hours that we've sat and worked on this. So I hope that you put that in place, because we got a water system that's needing constant repair. This building needs to be repaired at some point. How are you going to do that without CIPs? What's the project? When does that get funded? How does it get funded? So that's the one thing I've learned in this process. And the other thing that really bothers me about this whole project is the lack of trust going both directions, 100% both directions. I have nothing invested in. Several weeks ago, I just about walked away. I'm too bullheaded to walk away, but I just about walked away because I can't get an honest truth going both directions. The lack of trust is embarrassing from the outside, and I don't know how you fix that. So, any other questions? Yep.
Thank you, actually, Mr. Evans. Yes, I think this entire board agrees with your statements as to a CIP and looking at how to implement a strategic plan for the necessary improvements to this township.
Are they in place on this budget list?
Well, and my question to you, sir, is that is part of that discussion, and I know that from your standpoint, and correct me if I'm wrong, as an ad hoc committee member, was centric to the budget process.
Mm-hmm.
As we look at a potential $800,000 budget out of a singular department that has a revenue stream from the operating millage of just over $500,000.
Mm-hmm.
What are your potential suggestions to look at those budgeting shortfalls? Because to have a CIP and a strategic plan to implement, we have to have the monies to reinvest into the township. And that's one of the-
So in my professional world, there's two ways to raise revenue: cut expenses or raise prices. We can't, this township doesn't have any expenses to cut. Very quickly, we've spent 7 weeks, 8 weeks, and we whittled out $30,000.
Not very much.
On 800,000? Ultimately, this township isn't raising enough funds. Ultimately, I do not want to pay more taxes, and I'll tell you right now, I would probably vote no on a millage right now, because the lack of trust in this whole county. We've all been hit with the school budgets shortfalls. We did pass that millage the second time. The talk around town on the sheriff's department is not well. I think everybody knows that. And so how does this township pass a millage right now?
Exactly, and that's, I think, part of the concern that we all have is.
So you have to get the trust of the community, and you have to have a straight line of how to get there. Projecting expenses going forward, as opposed to knee-jerk reaction that has been going on in this place for decades, I believe, has to happen. You've got to start somewhere. Where do you stand right now, today? That's what I've tried to talk to Dave about and the committee about is, I don't care what happened yesterday. I've got the ability to forget yesterday very quickly because I'm focused on today and tomorrow. You have to gain the trust of the community. I believe the community will support a fire department or whatever that department looks like. I think the residents will support a township. How can we expect a township to run on dollars from the year 2000 or the year 1980, whatever number you want to pick it? We all know our households don't do that today. You know, do a comparison of what a loaf of bread cost to a loaf of bread today. How can you have to explain that system. And there's going to be some very significant cuts before you can go forward, I think. And not only in one department. I think it's got to be every single department.
Trustees, any questions for Mr.
Yep.
So where does the $300,000 come from?
So right now, it's got to come from the same pair of pants. I've used that expression many times. The township's got one pair of pants with a bunch of different pockets in it. There's no other options. If we're going to run a department the way it has been ran, it's got to come from the operating of the township, the 1.13 mils or whatever it is.
0136.
Right. Right now, unless there is absolute extreme cuts, there's no other place for it to come from. I think this board, and I'm going to blame the board, they're not looking at other revenue streams either. There hasn't been, in my knowledge, I can't believe that our millage for equipment, that there's not matching funds for grants. This board as a body across many, many decades hasn't explored any monies that is available. In my knowledge, when was the last grant of significance that has happened in this township?
Of significance? Touche. Yes.
I mean, we extended the water department out through Squaw Bay, and we're still paying for that, and there was never a single grant applied for that. I've got inside source from that when Gary Rondo was here. And it's like, really? This township's paying for water mains going through Squaw Bay that has no residents on it. So why weren't monies available? I'm sure there's monies available. The government is giving away trillions of dollars in grants, and we've done a poor job as a township on finding that money. It takes extreme dedication and skilled writing to do it. I don't know if anybody here has that. I don't. I've never written a grant. I know that the school district has a lady that writes grants, and you hear about the millions of dollars the school district is receiving. Why can't Alpena Township for a fire department? Why can't we for a water department? Wouldn't it be nice to be able to get sewer out to this point? Wouldn't it be nice to get water past this point? There's grants available for that stuff. That's where the CIPs, back to my thought, where is the forward thinking? We've got water all the way out to the airport. Where's the forward thinking on what goes on out that way? There isn't. It's all knee-jerk reaction because we're in such a tight place. We're emergency reacting. It's no different than I've vocally said it many times. COVID has caused many people to react technology-wise. You guys have spent lots of money on new microphones trying to figure it out. It should have been in place 10 years ago if you had any forward thinking. Every other community, we lived in Okemos 25 years ago and they were broadcasting their township meetings at that point online, or not online, but on the television. So the CIPs this township needs.
Can I?
Mhm.
Wholeheartedly agree with the CIPs. Is it something that would be a potential conversation that would be a continuance of the ad hoc? Because as you had formally mentioned, in the 7 to 8 weeks that you guys have been working to look at scenarios within the budget, I think you stated that you've been able to reduce that total number by
Minimal,
$30,000.
yeah.
With an anticipated potential over expenditure budget of $300,000 out of the general fund. And I agree with you wholeheartedly, is where do you explore those revenue streams? But how can we justify one department with that kind of expenditure versus any other department? That's what's the quandary.
Mhm.
Any insight?
I don't think it's an ad hoc committee responsibility to do that.
No, I was just asking from your position in the time that you looked at that, is that something that was, because I don't disagree. A strategic plan, that's something that I think we all.
That wasn't necessarily what our duties were. We were tasked to stay on point of where do we go? How do we figure out what the township fire department budget is? How do we get going? That becomes another committee of some sort. And everybody can be committed out of life. Personally, it's our elected officials, in particular yours as a supervisor, to be going forward with that stuff. It's not, that's what you're elected to do, is run the township forward. Or you hire a business manager and let them kind of figure that stuff out. Where does that money come from? Another good question. I have my thoughts, but I'll keep those to myself. Norm, did you have a question?
Well, I was just gonna say, where does that money come from? I've been on this board starting my 7th, 8th year, I believe.
Uh-huh.
So, I came in, I knew nothing, I still know nothing. I've learned a lot, I've got a whole lot to learn yet. But where does the money come from? It's always been living right on the edge and always where that next dollar's gonna come from. A strategic plan, we've talked about, back in my early days, I call it sock money. The sock never got any money put in it.
Yep.
And so the strategic plan, we even hired a gentleman to work on us with that down the road when we went into the charter township. He had some good experiences in those areas. But it's back to, you put out the fires you've got, you gotta get those put out before you can move forward. And we've been putting out a lot of fires. So we're moving forward. I think this board, in the last 4 years, and we've had changes of clerks, we've had a change in one of our trustees. So we've had a lot of issues going on that we've worked our way through, and I think we're ready to move forward. But now we have to resolve what is gonna happen with the fire department. $300,000 in our budget is huge to the rest of the township.
Right.
So if you're gonna take 300 grand out of the general fund, something's gotta give. So does the fire department get, or does the general fund and the rest of the township get? So
Back to my-
you put
back
the
to my-
onus on the board.
Back to my point is, there's not enough money. You're running bankrupt. I've said it multiple times. This township is probably a couple of years away from bouncing checks and having to have the state of Michigan run this and make some significant changes. I don't want to raise taxes, but that's the only option there is. You have to have more revenue.
So I disagree with you about being bankrupt or whatever. There is the case of,
You are outspending your money every year. You're not putting money away for a new fire truck. You're not putting money away for a new parking lot. You're not putting money away for the roof. You're not putting money away for anything. You are dying as a township. You are letting things get so bad that it's going to implode. Is there cash in the bank? Yeah, I'm not saying that there's, but where is the money to replace the roof? When was this roof replaced?
Replaced?
When was this roof last replaced?
Replaced, it's been worked on,
When was this roof brand new?
I want to say 2006 it was re-encapsulated. It's been, I know this, you're preaching so much to the choir, we're with you. But
So that's my
but in the
point.
same vein,
That's my point, is you can't just keep using the same dollars and think you're gonna change. I don't wanna raise taxes. No way. But what other options are there?
So one of the things you should know as a board, thank you, Chad,
Mhm.
that we tried to explore, from a budgetary standpoint, as many different options as we could. We looked at the budget you have in front of you with 7 people. We looked at the budget with 6 people. We looked at the budget with having hours of operation from, like, say, 6 o'clock in the morning till 6 o'clock at night. All of which had impact on the budget, but not significant impact on the budget. And so we floated around, or at least we discussed, things like fire and EMS authorities that would try to consolidate operations of multiple municipalities into one entity that, you know, everyone sort of contributed into. We didn't take that very far because it's difficult, you know, in a 2-hour setting each time you want to talk about something, to focus in on one area. But that would certainly be an option. Completely agree with Chad. At the end of the day, the revenue stream that the township has is inadequate. Fire department millage, just inadequate. And so that's, anybody that would look at this budget, and I think Bev said it best when she said what she knew on day one of this ad hoc committee is significantly different than what she knows on day whatever it is. And so these huge learning curves, when you begin to look at one item and pick apart one section of whether it be a business or whether it be a municipality or whatever you might throw into that name, you can focus in very well on those items. And that's precisely what we did, but we also come across the reality of cost of doing business. When you consider that the township millage hasn't been increased since the Headley Amendment, that is a very long time. And during that period of time, all costs have escalated. And so it really isn't, you can't, you can't place the blame on any one department. You just can't, because it's a cumulative thing, and we can go into the sort of coulda, shoulda, woulda all we want, and it won't do any good. And so we have to look forward, as both Bev and Chad have said, and that will be the board's challenge. And so the ad hoc committee all basically agree that the need for a township fire department is there, and we should try everything we can to continue to operate the fire department within our own structure until such time as we can. We have talked many times that change is inevitable, whether it be in a fire department, whether it be in our homes, whether it be in our businesses, whether it be in everyday life. And so we can't rely upon the ways of doing things in the past when the future doesn't care about that. And so somewhere along the line, we have to try to reconcile everything and look at every option to move forward. But certainly at this time, this committee feels it's important to run this department, and will money have to come out of the general fund to accommodate that objective? Yes. Will there be a point in time, hopefully, a group can be put together to focus in on ways to accomplish that goal, whether it be through consolidation, whether it be through an authority, whether it be running our own operation, but all of them are going to require money, every one. And so the people of the township, whether we like it or not, are going to have to look at adjusting the cost of doing business. If the people want services, those services come with a cost. And so if we move for a millage, whatever that looks like and whenever that looks like it, and if it's voted down, then we've either exhausted all of the resources that we have available and we move on to Plan B. But until such time as we've exhausted those things, I think we have a bit of an obligation to try to accommodate this fire department. That's my opinion. I believe it's the opinion of all of the people on the committee.
I feel that, Chad, just so that everybody can hear. Thank you.
The one thing that is unfortunate is this exercise wasn't performed a couple of years ago when the millages were passed. That's the unfortunate part, because we were in the same position a few years ago. And sitting in this committee, I have gathered that there was some research done on how much it took to operate this department, but it wasn't dove into really, really deeply. We've got an probably insignificant millage for equipment. Finding out that our equipment is incredibly old and incredibly challenging to maintain. Turnout gear is probably, it's safe, but not, we need to be replacing it on a yearly, we have to be rotating it. We should be purchasing a couple of pieces of those equipment every single year. It's unfortunate that the thought was only on very immediate needs. Back to CIPs, back to having a strategic plan in place. It's unfortunate that the millages, we increased the one, but we're running a 3 mill department on 1.5. That's the reality.
Those were my words exactly 2 years ago when we were So I don't disagree with you. We are very on the low end of a financial revenue stream.
Mhm.
But to your point, you have two options as a business owner.
Right.
Either increase your revenue stream or you eliminate expense.
Right?
And so,
And unfortunately, I really don't think that this township is fat on anything. We've cut all the paper clips that we can. There is no extra major expenses that are, I truly believe that. And I believe that in the fire department also. There isn't any extra fat there to cut.
are there any questions for Chad or Rebecca?
Well, since I'm the new kid on the block here.
We do have Chief Dave here too that can answer some of them.
We're going to get to him, by all means.
I'm going to say some things in response to Chad, because I wasn't on the board, so I'm not taking as much heat maybe as the rest of you. But the, number one, on grants, yeah, I'm all for grants, but they have to be identified by someone, and it's got to be someone smarter than me and is more in tune with what grants are available. Normally, I would think we would hear about that either through, through Dave or someone that would know about fire department grants that might be available. I don't know where else we find out, frankly. But I'm all for grants, except when.
With that, just very quickly, we don't network well. This township doesn't network well. Dave doesn't network well. I don't think the township networks well. There's associations,
We can find grant writers at NEMSCA and whatever.
Mhm.
I'm aware of that. But first we have to identify the grant.
and what I'm saying is we don't network well in finding where those grants are.
And if somebody can point me or
Right.
anything on how to do that.
Right, I don't know where fire
network,
grants are, but
frankly.
there's all kinds of money available. I mean, it's everywhere.
But grants don't pay the operating expenses, they don't pay salaries normally, except during COVID maybe. But, our biggest operating expense in this budget is employment. And so we're not gonna get grants for that I'm aware of. Grants typically come for stuff. I mean, I've dealt with the Besser Foundation at least, and when you're asking them for money, you're asking them to help you replace or buy new stuff. One of my experiences with grants, though, has been that sometimes that increases your operating expenses. When you get a grant to buy some stuff, then you got additional operating expenses. Replacing old, antiquated equipment, probably the opposite of that, but, otherwise. The lack of trust, I know that's evolved, and I'm hoping that like Chad and Bev can help us work to try to bridge those gaps, because I don't think that was intentional from the prior boards, but it's happened, and I realize that. We've already talked about in budgeting in our second for me, or second for you, first for me, budgeting session. We already talked about some capital funds set asides. So we already are thinking of that at this point. But I just wanted to point out that raising a millage is always considered to be a last resort. It is with me, it is with anyone else, but I don't know where the money's gonna come from to support what we do either. I'm not agreeing that we're gonna go bankrupt in the next 2 years, but I don't wanna have to eat those words either. And so, yes, we have some tough decisions to make, and right now, we're trying to staff a fire department, anew. And so it's kind of hard to even think about or spend much time on any of these other issues until we figure out what we're going to do there. So that's all I've got to say. But I did want to defend the board chat a little bit because I don't think, I don't think that all of these things haven't been considered, but nobody wants a lot of us live in the township because we don't want to pay the taxes we'd have to pay in the city. Right. So, you know, we got to take that into consideration with everything else we do.
Can't expect the same services that the city provides
Right.
on township millage.
And one of my first responses to the whole merger concept of the fire departments was I think the primary response, as far as I'm concerned, as a citizen, was, are we going to deteriorate our service and reduce our response times? Actually, in the experience we've had here, for one thing, we've made some mistakes here, in my opinion, on equipment we bought. I don't think we needed 2 new ambulances. Really don't. And Dave, I know you might disagree with that, but that's my position. That was, I believe, a mistake. We were operating a BLS system. We don't transport. And so, but can we get as good or better service right now, at least on the north side of this township, from an emergency? I mean, we have 20 fires here, right? 20 structure fires. So, how much equipment do you want to buy for 20 structure fires at the expense those pieces of equipment are, and the changes we'd have to make in buildings to house those pieces of equipment? So, when you look at all that, and you then talk about, well, what's really the most important thing? If I have a heart attack or stroke, I'd like to have a 4-minute response time. And I'd like to have someone there that can give me the medications I need, which isn't an EMT, as I understand it, to help me get through that crisis and get to the hospital. So we got a lot to think about. And those are the things that go through my head. And I haven't even got to the grant idea yet, so you better.
I will add to your comment about grant monies and how some grant money can be used towards employment expenses, payroll. Here's the problem with it. They're not sustaining. And so if we are lucky enough to get a $200,000 grant, let's say, to cover employment costs, what do we do at the end of that grant cycle?
Well, that's true. We have people, I think at least 2 people in our office that are grant funded.
Yeah.
And they know they're grant funded when they take the job.
Yep.
And they were additional hires, right? And so they weren't people that already existed. They were additional hires to do a certain function. Now, our victims' rights advocate's probably always going to get that grant funding. But the assistant victims' rights advocate and the other person that does our 4D work, which means nothing to you, but it's the person who works with me to establish child support and so on for people that get social services income.
Right.
That person's always probably going to be funded too because the state of Michigan wants that person in our county.
Yeah,
But
so
most times, it's a short-term thing.
that's right. And so we spoke about those to a certain extent. And yeah, we can probably do a better job of trying to find that money. But as you said, oftentimes they're matching money. And if we don't have money in a pail to match that grant, then we may as well not even apply for the grant. And so, but we all know that. We all know that. And yet we should still try, because they're not all like that. And those that we can put money into either equipment or personnel, great, we should try. And seeking them out is not incredibly difficult. You just got to know where to look, I guess. And so that's what we'll no doubt be looking at.
Doing something is better than doing nothing.
Well, Chad, we've done more than nothing. We've definitely done more than nothing. But I think your point is that we could do better. And that's what we should strive for.
Laura,
I'd just like to make a couple comments. I mean, I appreciate, all of the work that you guys have done on the ad hoc committee. But this is a township issue, I mean, especially with budgeting, but, I've been on the board a little more than 5 years. I'm sorry, going on my 5th year, but anyway, I mean, we have done a lot since we have come onto this board. And I mean, we have got our books in order with all the BSNA modules. Now we have tracking systems. I mean, I just kind of feel like it's sounding like we haven't done anything. We're just sitting back, not worrying about CIPs. We have done a lot, and we have a long way to go yet. But it's like, we have our IT system, we've put into place. I mean, we did get the millage passed for the, we did buy the 2 ambulances. We are buying a fire truck. And it's like, and each year, we do talk about capital improvement programs and things that we can do to look forward, but then it ends up, okay, then we end up running into, it just seems like there's always a fire we always have to end up putting out. COVID hit, but we do save money. We've looked at many ways of saving money. For example, I mean, this whole building hadn't been painted even on the inside, and I know it's a small thing to talk about, but I mean, our supervisor painted this room. We didn't hire someone. I painted the front office, I mean, we've tried to do things without, it's like, oh my God, it would cost $3,000 to hire somebody to do this. Okay, well, let's do it ourselves. We'll buy the paint. We have looked at many ways of saving money and still trying to be very conscientious of our budget. And I do agree there is a lot more that we can do as far as grant writing. I think communication is key all the way around. Communication is huge, and that can always be improved upon.
I too agree with you, Chad, about the trust issue. I feel it is on both sides, and I think both sides are to blame for it. I used to be a very trusting person. I used to be very trusting, and now I would say I have trust issues. And starting here, because it's all over. But it is something we all have to work at. Both sides have to work at it, and both sides have to be upfront and not hide things from each other. That's all I have to say about that.
Fire department, we talk about what the costs are and every other department that we have. The fire department is living beyond its means because it started out, I'm doing a little bit of history on this, and I kind of slacked off, but I'm definitely going to get back into it. But the fire department was started, and it came out of the general fund, and everybody talked about general fund money, but they kept expanding and kept taking more money out of general fund and never went to the people for a millage until 99, 98. We got it for 10 years, and it was for a mill. Then we got it extended for another 10 years, but in between they tried to go for a mill and a half, and it got shot down. I might be a little off on these, but this is just a quick memory because I bring this with me. So really, the fire department is living outside of its means, and we don't have those monies allocated for it in reference to coming out of the general fund. Things were advanced and things were done, even like you had mentioned, Chad, you take a fire truck out of the general fund, go to the people, let them buy the fire truck. We didn't do that. We're still paying for that. So if the people, we did, was it November, that we went to the city and we worked on somewhat of a plan. We introduced that plan, and we got a lot of heat because we weren't getting the service that they were accustomed to getting. But it was back to, we put a plan that we could afford. So I guess we need to go, when we talk about millages, we need to go back to the people and say, do you want this service? Then this is what it's going to cost. Now, if you don't want to pay for that service, then we know what we have to do. So I refer to it as a champagne taste with a beer budget. And it's been going on for years. It just didn't start last year, 5 years ago. It's been started since the fire department's inception, which I believe was in 1958. So I'm digging up some history. I got a long ways to go, but I hope to have some more on this. But we can't live out of our means.
So, and I think we all know that, we definitely, there's a revenue problem across the whole township. But I think after this whole process, we've uncovered that it's on us. We are obligated, I think, to keep this department going and let the people decide what they want to do. But let's do our work, put a plan together, and present it to the people and say, this is what it's gonna cost. Is this what you want? And let them decide. If it fails at the ballot, then we have to move on to another plan.
You have that plan yet?
No, I think that is yet to be desired. We have to, as a board, I think, put a committee together to reevaluate everything, every part of the department, from operations to personnel costs to everything. But we gotta do our work, I think. It's on us.
I agree with Cash that we need to do our work and we need to explore every option available. I also feel we need to educate the public because it has been recently said to me, well, an ambulance is an ambulance. No, it's not. BLS versus ALS is a huge difference. A paramedic versus an EMT, different in qualifications and what they can do. Our public really doesn't, from the people I've spoken to, don't understand that. So I feel like we have to educate people that there are different levels of service and what you get for the money you have.
Michelle, thank you. You're absolutely correct. And I think we've discussed that in our committee with the fact is so many people really and truthfully do not understand exactly what we're talking about. And I know this much comparatively to chief and chief and I get the same conversations. Well, what do you mean? What do you mean? And education is going to be very, very clearly a key because people really do not understand. And the thing about it is Mr. Poley, you talked a little bit about history and general fund, and it all came out, and it was very difficult to actually capture what the actual costs were. There is a philosophy at that point in time, and apparently, because I think you said that it has gone through many years, that was supported. And so I don't know if there was a philosophy change to say, okay, now we want to be an independent, self-sufficient fire department versus no money coming out of the general fund. I personally, as a taxpayer, do not agree with that. I pay taxes for services. Am I saying that 100% it needs to be funded from the general fund? No. Do I agree with Cash? There are other aspects and revenues that we need to investigate? Absolutely. Skibby, I wanted to say to you when you said, how do we justify things for the $300,000? Do you think your life is worth $300,000? Because this is what we're actually talking about, is life safety.
Ms. Banks, Skippy is my last name.
I apologize.
But we also, in this vein of discussion, because once again, I think blinders are being put on to some extent. Within our township, our municipality, through the Alpena County Ambulance, which supports all Alpha units, collects the exact same 1.5 mils that we collect as an operating budget for the fire department. So just roughly just shy of coming into this fiscal of $527,000. Is every life worth it? Yes. I have a small child. I would not even entertain the discussion of the potentials of consolidation if there was the potential that a service was lessened. But the point there is there always going to be a greater good with one department versus another department versus another department? And it kind of goes to right where Mr. Asher was talking about is we have a revenue issue, but we also have to find that balance between an expenditure issue. It's not just a cut and dry, one solution fits all kind of a scenario. So that is why I once again applaud you for the time that you have put in there, because there is, and as we go through, and as Clerk Palavich also mentioned, it's an education issue. And that's what we're starting to do in a better light. Yeah, there is a trust issue. Part of that expenditure issue, as we will see obviously progressing forward, and a large part of our labor expense, as was stated, which is the greatest expense that we have with all of our revenue, is we should now see at least a reduction in the labor costs because we are performing the non-emergency medical. There's a lot of things. It's not just a one variable solution. It's a revenue stream. Do we look at exploring that? But it's also an expenditure issue. So is my life worth it? Is your life worth it? Is everybody's life worth it? Most definitely. And as taxpayers within this municipality, you are already paying for that service. So how do we justify the expense when, if you want to look at it in that vein, is with the 1.5 mil that we're receiving, should we solely focus on fire service? What does that look like? This is going to be an ongoing communication and educational process as we move forward. Because, you know, we're focused and very centric to the emergency services discussion right now. But outside of emergency services, Chad, is your road smooth? And that's where you get back to the revenue stream. But we also heard it from a very smart individual that if a millage came to him, he would still vote it down, even though he is of knowing that the greater good is an increase in taxable revenue stream. So what is that breaking point? That is if there was any miscommunication, that would be it. But is everybody's life worth it, Ms. Banks? 110%.
May I finish?
By all means.
Okay, because what I was going to expand further on is what the thing about it is back to the education is what we need to educate people is to understand it's not just about dollars and cents. Is it a huge factor? Absolutely. If we're out, if what's coming in and goes out is way more, we're in bigger trouble than what we imagine, and we're not going to have any services whatsoever, period. And so I agree with you and understand, but that goes to the education about it is because we do have people that go, oh my gosh, you know what, we really don't think about emergency services until we have to call 911. And then you know what, you think a lot about it. Reflecting back in November when I had to call 911, I think a lot about it now. And even just to Russ, your comment about medics and the meds. Well, the city response with their ALS has not changed. It's my understanding those medics have always been responding because of the county contract. So that's a variable that has not changed with our services whatsoever.
Right. But I'll respond when that's my turn.
And the thing that I think that the township needs to understand and reflect on is the basic is, do I agree with the fact is that there are some ALS quicker times that have because they're stationed out of here? I would not say that all ALS times have increased, okay? So we've got some better, we've got some worse. What I think that we need to look at as from a township standpoint, what has changed from 4 or 5 months ago was the fact is we used to have 4 people who would be guaranteed to respond. And I'm not talking about paid on call. I'm talking about we had 4 bodies. Now, I don't know if anyone else in this room has done CPR other than the 2 medics and myself, that the fact is the more people that you have available and respond, the better outcomes are. Period. I cannot bag somebody and do CPR at the same time. It's physically impossible to do. So it's my understanding that the fact is what has happened now, because we do not have the Northside BLS response from the township's part, we went from 4 people to 2 people responding. That is a 50% decrease. And now I'm paying more with a city contract that they already are getting paid from the county to respond to ALS. So correct me if I'm wrong, correct me if I'm confused, but that's what my understanding is. So I'm a little concerned with the fact is we're still, as a township, still paying tax dollars on the same amount for a decrease in bodies and services. Yes, ma'am.
I was under the understanding, and maybe Chief Borbush could
paid on call.
Was our own.
I did reference guaranteed. Paid on call is not guaranteed. Date, what?
I'm sorry.
Okay.
Like I said, we're doing apples to oranges.
Right, because when you look at what we're required for fire services and medical first response, if we're staffing our stations, our people are going out as a supplement with what the city is doing through a contract or through a millage already. So you are in essence less services, less bodies.
Of what is guaranteed, yes, ma'am. It's my understanding.
It goes back to Cash's point. The township has to know what they want. The voters have to say, this is the service we want or expect, and therefore, here's the dollars.
And I support that. I would completely say that what we need to do is the public, because I'm sure, Michelle, you said you've talked to people out there. I've had a lot of discussions with a lot of public. And the sad thing about it is, and I'm going to back y'all on this, because they come to me, they tell me all this stuff, but they won't put it in writing to you. And I've seen that, and I understand that, and I understand that frustration. But the public really needs to be involved, because really and truthfully, if this is what they want, if they want more bodies in response and they want it to be our township fire department, they need to rally behind that, and they need to understand that it is going to cost something. We can't do it for free. We just can't.
And that's one of the points I wanted to make, is that I did drive ambulance for almost 3 years down in the Detroit area in Costa County. And that was in the 70s, when all you had to have was an advanced Red Cross and a CPR and one other thing, I think. It wasn't much. And we took over right after the state disallowed funeral homes, operating ambulances out of the funeral homes.
Oh,
And so, I worked for a private ambulance company, and we, in Mecosta County, we had 2 runs a day, and in Royal Oak and Birmingham, that area, we had 25 runs a day. So we learned a lot, got busy, but, I've had CPR training and wound training since I worked for the county, twice refreshed in the last 12 years. So a lot of people can do CPR. But I think my charge, if I were making it to the ad hoc committee and you're going to design a fire department, I would say, we've been doing it with EMTs, but if we're going to design a fire department that we would like to see provide the same level of service that the citizens in the city can get, if that's what we want, then design it with ALS ambulances, which ALS ambulance isn't an ALS ambulance unless you've got a paramedic on it, right? So then we have to have the people that we can train and want to work for us, which means we have to have a pay scale. It's probably different than it is now, that want to work for us to get training, which is a few hundred hours more than an EMT gets, to run an ALS ambulance. So, if we're going to own them, let's staff them. But I mean, the point is this: if we want to design that system, then budget that, and then lay that out, because there's no way in the world we can afford
So
that right
the only
now.
issue with that, Russ, is we are in a tiered system already. So unless we want to go back to the county and say, we're not paying your millage for ALS because we're going to do our own, that's going to require some action on the board's part to do that
Well,
down the road.
and as you know, I reviewed the contract that the county has with the city for ALS services. But the point is, if we want those kinds of responses with 4 people getting there within a minimal amount of time, preferably less than 4 minutes, then we're going to have those kinds of people out in our township, because the city's not going to get to all parts of our township in 4 minutes or less, right?
No, and the paid on call is essential in that, as well as,
Right, so if we're doing it with paid on call,
but when
in my
we're talking,
opinion,
I think when we're talking minutes of response, when we have somebody stationed that is geographically somewhat close, we can get somebody there until ALS comes. So I think we gotta decide what we wanna do. Do we wanna submit a plan with an ALS? Do we wanna submit what we're required to do? I think there's many options we can explore.
So I.
Because if we're only sending people out that can do CPR, I mean, that's not enough for a stroke patient. That's not what's needed for a stroke patient. That's not what's needed for an overdose. That's not, you know, those kinds of things. Now, I think we can carry Narcan, and I think there's an exception for EMTs to administer Narcan. I could be wrong.
Well, and maybe we can let Chief, have an opportunity here at some point. and-
By all means, Steve, did you have one last thing?
Well, I guess the only thing I wanted to point out is that we do see hiring people is not as easy as we would think, and then trying to find somebody that would have paramedic skills is even more complicated. So, in my estimation, we sort of walk before, we crawl before we walk. If we want to have our, and I know we're talking about emergency services, but we've talked about, frankly, getting back to the core business of the township, and that's firefighting and medical first responding. And that means we don't need ambulances. That means we don't need all of these things. Sell the ambulances, buy a Suburban or a couple of Suburbans, and go back to basics. And then if we need to at some later date, crawl back up. But I think it gets very, very difficult to take the tack that you're talking about, at least
Well,
initially,
I agree. That's the realistic approach.
Right.
My approach is not necessarily realistic.
Yeah.
But my approach is, what do we want?
No, yeah, absolutely.
And so, if we're going to go to the people for a millage, what do we want them to fund? The crawling, or the walking or running?
Gets back to Chad's point of having a plan. Fail to plan, plan to fail.
And just before you do start, so, and correct me if I'm wrong, I believe it was back in our first term, the previous board had actually made and went towards a paramedic licensure.
Correct.
And that was what the strive was for, was to become a standalone paramedic-based emergency response.
That, yeah,
In 2017, this board had action because it came from yourself and other captains at the time, because it was near impossible to find staff at that educational level to drop the paramedic from the application.
yes and no. What you're referring to was, I believe, occurred back in 2015, 2016, was a recommendation by the previous chief to add paramedic to the list of requirements for new hires to move in that direction in the future. And we weren't talking 2 or 3 years, we were talking 10 years down the road. At that point in time, the rate of attrition from our guys that were on the department, that's where that came from. I'm going to have to look at my notes here because you guys were spending so much ammo at me. I was not starting to count whether it was 556 or 223. First of all, I apologize. I stood up and said, you guys are doing apples to oranges, okay? Cash alluded to the tiered system. I want to get one thing out of the way first because I may be a little bit long-winded here, and not to blow, I'm sorry I speak plainly, not to blow sunshine up anybody's skirt, but I want the board to know how appreciative I am in the department for what the ad hoc committee has done, because I will admit to you, I came into this with some very stiff tunnel vision and some lines drawn in the sand. But you have some very
wonderful, talented, dedicated people on the ad hoc committee that have worked very hard for nothing. I mean, nothing reimbursement, not for, so. They've put an awful lot of free work into this and crunched numbers, and I just want you guys to know I appreciate that a lot. So, moving on from that, the first, I'll boomerang back to the ALS stuff. The first thing I noted that I want to hit is there was a question of, I want to address the statement that we're outliving our means and that we're the largest portion of the general fund contribution. Number one, I'm waiting for that because from my point of view in my chair, if I'm being told I'm over budget, I'm going to go back and look at line item by line item. And when I go through 36 of them and see I'm 10, 15% over budget on 2 of them, and I don't have any control over theirs because they're federally mandated, I'm wondering where because that budget was approved. Let's go back to that. The other thing is a slice of pie theory. I don't want to sound condescending. However, I get that question a lot too, is why are you 60% of the general fund, et cetera, et cetera. Well, if you look up front in Laura's office, you got 3 people working. Should be 2 in the clerk's office, 2 in the building department, 3 in assessing. Then you come to the fire department where at this time last year we had 34 employees. I mean, do we need to do the math on that? Yeah, I'm a larger part of the budget because I'm the largest department. Now, not to oversimplify that, but that is my response to that. I've been chastised a lot for living in the past and not moving on, and I'll just reiterate this once more. But if again, this is my personal opinion, but if the township was in such dire financial straits that we needed to look at merging, defunding, rearranging, or otherwise reorganizing this department back in 2017, it seems like that would have come up in 18 when we asked for millages, when we chartered. That problem could have been taken care of or at least addressed back then. That's my comment on that. I do agree with the statement that it's a matter of educating the public, and we get a lot of going back and forth about, you know, bang for the buck and who's providing more for the money, and that's not the way. I feel personally you guys are asking questions that were answered back in 1952 and addressed again in the 80s and in the 90s. So, I mean, the decision was made for this township to have its own department. You guys have heard me publicly state before, at one point in time, the city did in fact cover the township for fire. And it was decided back, wasn't 58, it was 52, that it would have its own department. And yes, it was ran entirely out of the general fund. Times change, we're spending more. This stuff needs to be addressed. I feel the ad hoc committee is very aware of that and doing a pretty good job of that. I'm not sure also where we came into the point of discussion where knowing that this department was stood up in 1952, and we've been, I think, doing a good job ever since then, why all of a sudden in some people's eyes our response may not be adequate, or we're not, to my knowledge, when I hired in here in 92, 93 in the city, we were a tiered system. Okay, they were new to ALS back then, but what that meant is by dictate of the Medical Control Authority, they wanted first responders on scene in the rural parts of the county prior to the ALS unit getting there. that's what we're doing. To my knowledge, nobody has rescinded that order, restructured, or otherwise. And I won't get into the ping pong of when we get into this urban metropolitan area of the township that is closely tied to the city. There is no doubt that the city units and the medics are going to get there as quicker than us and provide advanced life support. We're talking about the bulk of the people that live out in the township that, you know, are greater distances away. And that lends back to the conversation of, you know, are we sending an EMT, 2 EMTs, an EMT and a paramedic, 2 paramedics? Yeah, up to the people. But to my knowledge, that those confines, that construct hasn't changed. But all of a sudden, we're talking about reorganizing the department and reimagining, and I agree with that. If you want to move forward, I would want to point out to people that at this point, I would not go back to an ALS transport service, but I'd be happy to crunch numbers for this board as to what it would cost for me to stand up 2 ALS paramedic engines that are non-transporting. If that's the question. I mean, that's not a problem at all. I also want people listening and the board to know that as I watch the ping pong go back and forth across the table, you guys do realize you already have 4 paramedics in your employment. It's just that we're working within the constraints of a BLS system. So again, if that's the question, then, you know, turn me loose. We'll get her done. And the other thing I made a note on was how are we going to move forward? And we've had some very interesting discussions about, do we run this as a business or is it part of our township infrastructure? I think you guys know which part I fall under. I'm open more now to running it like a business, but we got to pick one of those two and stick with it. So we can't run it as my learned opponents say, you have to run it like a business or you're going to kill it. And then I say, okay, in a business, we'd raise the price because we're not matching our product. And then all of a sudden it's like, oh no, we don't want to do that because we'll lose business. Which, are we going to operate it like it's part of our tax-based infrastructure? Are we going to operate it like it's a business? So I'm on board either way. But I say, you know, and again, I think the ad hoc committee has addressed a great portion of that. And not to get too much back into, away from the ad hoc committee and what would be new business, but to address the question of grants. I wrote that down too. I was telling the ad hoc committee the other day, I have wrote grants and received them in the past. I continue to do that. Not as many as the year before. We just received one from the DNR, small one, $3,500. So we're addressing those things. So I think the other thing I'll save that for new business. So out of what I said, and I'm chopping this up kind of a bit, but are there any questions back from the board for me on where this is?
Well, you made the comment about the department started in 1952.
Mm-hmm.
What did the department look like in 1952? Was it all paid on calls?
No, it was when it originally started in '52, it actually only started out as 2 full-time guys with a balance of paid-on calls, which back then I believe was only around 12.
And just my point of this is, it has changed dramatically since 1952. Change is constantly happening. Everything, every business, every office in this township constantly evolves. So I guess how it started in 1952 and how it is now is a completely different department, is what I would look
It
at
is.
as. Okay. 'Cause
So-
it sounded like you were saying it was the same as 1952.
No, I guess
Unless I missed-
without usurping some things I've already said is why are we looking at going back to 1952?
Oh, okay.
Well, as my sixth and final point is, and I've publicly stated too, that from the standpoint of my chair, I've always been, I'm kind of rarity because I'm an old guy with a lot, well, very short gray hair now, is from a fire standpoint, I've always been a fire first. That is our mission statement. That is our duty as a fire department. I love the idea of standing Army principle and running EMS out of fire departments. But fire, for me, is my primary mission. We are now doing the EMS with the advent of growth through the 60s and 70s and 80s, and that standing Army principle. That is part of that's part of our job now. But I'm a little bit uncomfortable. Look, I'm trying to choose my words carefully because yeah, I know when I talk, I see your eyebrow go up every once in a while because I don't choose my words carefully. But I'll just put this out there. I'm uncomfortable with looking at the demise of my fire department based on EMS statistics. Because I've been told to concentrate on my mission statement. So if you want me to do that, I'll argue EMS statistics, but don't, let's not, that's why I made the comment earlier of the apples to oranges. The township just several months ago was, had 2 guys full-time at each station, north and south, and we covered each other's back to meet the 2-out requirement for the BLS transport. We did transport, Russ. It just was not emergent basis. It was none. So, and now we're being compared to, we can't afford 1 guy at 1 station to provide BLS, but we're funding two medics out of the North Station and being compared to that. And I'm not saying that's a bad thing. I'm just saying the comparison. So, I mean, it's a no-brainer if you put two medics in an ambulance up here. Yeah, they're going to be a lot closer to a lot more of the north side, and they're going to start getting there a lot sooner. That's a no-brainer. So.
One question I'd like to say is I know this has been.
Laura, could you please turn the microphone on?
I know every year since I've been here, when we're at budget time, I mean, we're always looking at everyone's budget, and I know specifically we've looked at the fire department's budget, so I don't know, this isn't a surprise that it's been, an issue over the years of the expenditures and, the revenues and how everything is more crunchy every year. I think one of the biggest things is the overtime. I mean, it's so hard to budget that number, and the overtime is just, it's very much exceeded, and it's
Right.
hard to budget not knowing that. And why do we have so much overtime? Is it that we need more people? Is it a better schedule? Is it?
No, thank you for that, because that leads me to yet another point is once we were made aware that there were some drastic changes that needed to be made for the continuation of the department, there was a decision made unilaterally by us that should cut my call volume by 50%, which that 50%, it stood for a lot of your overtime. To me, that was a very incredibly drastic change from the way we were providing service. And I'm a little bit uncomfortable that we've made that drastic change, and me personally, I'm waiting to see how that's going to shake out, and I see everybody else continuing down the road of no, the money's not there, let's get around, like, we
Referring to
don't know what,
non-emergency transports.
yeah, from what we've extrapolated, our call volumes should drop from around 2,200 calls a year down to maybe 1,100, 12 at the most. And that's going to have a huge effect on overtime, fuel, maintenance, et cetera, et cetera. So I guess to sum this up, and once again, thank the ad hoc committee, but if you're looking for an opinion or a recommendation from the chief of your fire department, mine is hold fast. Let's see how this is going to work over the next year. We've made a very drastic change in our service model. Let's see how it's going to do. Let's get some feedback from the community to see, do they want us to stay? Do they want to see a fire district? Would they like to see us do ALS non-transport and continue that? The transport versus non-transport for me is a non-issue. There's already a contract with the city. They do an excellent job of that. That would not, to transport would not be in our best interest or purview. I do think that I could staff a couple ALS engines and get some paramedics to the scene quicker in the township if that's, or even with, I mean, and this is not going to be a cheap and overnight process. Don't let me sell that to you, but tell me, what do we want? Where are we going to go?
I'm just curious, I know of 2 who are paramedics, and you said there are 4?
Myself, Chris Stevens, Abby, and with the hire of Chris Wilson.
Okay.
And had Kevin stayed,
But you
that
would
would
have paid on
have been 5.
If
Yeah,
we-
yeah. So
And I think too, like when I look back at our budget numbers that we were looking at, you know, when we were doing the transports, we were around 700,000 in wages and benefits. Under this new direction, we should be closer to 5. I mean, we should see a $200,000 drop. Now, we're not gonna have any income coming in because we're not doing the transports anymore, but, you know, from last year's budget to this year, that should be a $200,000 just there alone. And then we managed to take some out of the operating costs. So what it's gonna end up being, I don't know, because this budget is based on a full year, and, you know, we're gonna have some fluctuation in there. So maybe a little better than we even think. So, but we won't know until we get about a year, or maybe more into it.
I don't think we'll know until we are fully staffed for 1 year.
Right.
I mean, until we are up to staff, we won't know for sure.
And how many candidates do we have that are interested at this point right now?
the update I gave the ad hoc committee is I have 11 active applications. 2 of the original 13. I believe it was at the board meeting, I might mix up my date here, 12th, 13th. I was okay to extend a contingent offer to them that we were interested in hiring them, and that's been done, and we've had 2 accept, Matt McDonald and Luke Meisner. So, and again, I'm not trying to jump ahead. I don't have the agenda in front of me, but if we were going to discuss that later, but at this point, this Saturday will have been 1 month since they've tentatively accepted. So I think we need to kick that in the rear and get it moving down the road.
Under Fire Department Ad Hoc Committee update.
Okay.
My question is, it was contingent upon getting a letter of understanding from the union for the new position.
That has been done.
I have not seen it.
It just got to me yesterday, and I just gave it
Okay,
to,
so I have not scheduled physical or anything, so I can move forward with that. And right now, our physicals, what we've gotten, the best prices I have is 2,600.
And that was
That's a lot
another
better
thing
than what we were
that,
doing.
I will
I'm sorry,
say
Steve.
that, excuse me for a moment, I will say that the union is amenable to taking a couple of those bigger tickets out of there. I seem to recall that the stress test was,
1,900.
yeah, that was the big ticket item. And so the union, and I don't know if Chris is on the phone or not, but, and maybe he can address that. I just don't know where we stood with it, but it seemed like through our discussions, and correct me if I'm wrong, that there was, the union was amenable to scratching that off the list.
Well, and to that end, I think that's part of this exercise. There's no an immediate fix. We're not there. And I don't want to use a ping pong analogy or look in a rearview mirror either. We have made considerable internal changes thus far. But the direction and the finality of where we end as a municipality with emergency services to be determined. Yeah, we did make one thing because I know historically, it's always been, is this a community service versus a business? Unfortunately, one of the good things that we did is eliminate a business out of a tax-based revenue stream. So that has already been taking place, and we'll see that gradual change fiscally moving forward. And right now, as we discuss, and I don't know what is on your agenda to really bring forward in the department, but with having an LOU just brought to the table today, and some of the content of discussion that now needs to shift from ad hoc to personnel in terms of negotiations of that union contract, I can safely say that with this just being set on the desk with no previous discussion or direction, it may make some of the immediate potential actions that may be wanted from your standpoint harder to ascertain here at today's meeting, because we have to get together as personnel, because there are some issues that need to be addressed moving forward and how that looks. So I would be.
But that was not what the motion was made that the hires were contingent on that letter.
Right.
And that's fine. I don't disagree. It just came to the board today. Do you disagree with that?
No, I don't.
Since you just came to the board. So, and we'll discuss that, but you also know as members of the ad hoc committee that that's kind of that fine line of, we know that there's an internal mechanism that we have to address, whether it be, it's all union based. So those are those conversations that need, that's where I was going. So.
Needs to be voted on and approved by the board yet. Because we didn't. I mean, do we have to vote on this? Because none of us have seen it.
Well, do you want to look at last meeting's minutes?
Well, I know what it says. It says approval of a letter of agreement or understanding. But none of us saw that letter. I mean, it could be a letter. I just.
Right, that came from our labor attorney.
Okay, well, I guess we needed to know that too.
Okay.
So that's all I'm saying. There's so many variables that before we rush in one singular direction, even though there is the urgency, we need to, before we make any bad decisions, have that plan of attack as we move forward. That's my only, I don't want to rush into the next fire. That's been my stance. Let's discuss it, and you guys have done an amazing job getting it to this point. But what is the plan of attack? That's the big picture that really hasn't come back to this board, is with all the work, what does that structure look like? Are we talking with shifts, or is it 12? These are all the variables that outside of the ad hoc committee, we haven't been afforded thus far. So I think that would be a discussion that would best be served amongst this entire board if so that direction of hiring, because we approved Luke, the potential of that hire, how long ago? And
We
nothing's-
approved it on, got the minutes.
Yeah, so I mean,
So to answer your question,
January 25th.
to answer your question about staffing,
yeah.
you have it in front of you with the budget that we submitted. That would be 7 people. The union would prefer 6. It's, the math doesn't
Can
work.
I ask, and I do apologize, the union would prefer 6. Why would the union prefer 6? Could you expound upon that?
Well, I think the easy answer is it's more overtime. And so, the numbers just don't work. And so, there is understandably, a concern that financially going backwards on the part of the employees, totally get that. There is no doubt that we are somewhat hogtied by the current union contract. And so there is no doubt that we have to look at pay scales. And so the budget that we presented was based upon 7 people. And as I mentioned earlier, all of the other scenarios, they just didn't work out. Even the shift working. The shift working saved some money, but not enough to justify having
It's 7 plus the chief. It's an 8 department.
Yes.
yeah, oh, yeah,
Thank you.
yeah, I stand corrected. So 8, including this guy. And so, but that's what we felt was the most workable way. And so, if there's any other input by the committee, great. But all of the scenarios just flat didn't work as well as we'd like.
Is this based on the 7 plus the chief based on 24-hour shifts?
Yes.
And our current union contract doesn't prevent us from having an 8-person or 7.
No, it's just not very clear, that's,
There's a lot of things not clear.
Yeah,
right, there's a lot of things that need to change in there, I agree. But, we looked at all kinds of scenarios, and 6 people almost works out to the same as 7, you're just not paying it in overtime. There's just not that much of a difference when it comes down to the dollar. Obviously, if you're paying out less overtime, it's gonna be better overtime, but, there's a lot of different factors that we looked at, and just,
And we weren't, we did not spend a significant amount of time on the union contract. We all read it, we all know it, but it was not our commission to delve into that, nor should it have been, for fear that we would be somehow negotiating a contract that we just didn't have a position to negotiate on. And Chris understood that too, that he was concerned that if he does these things, then we may be entering into negotiation. So we sort of pulled back on those sorts of things.
Yeah.
Clearly stated?
And into that, trustee Levin, I think we're all in agreement. That's a beautiful segue, that's kind of, it sounds like that's where we are just in terms of the discussion. Is it, from your position as an ad hoc member and other committees, by all means, are we at that point of where we need to actually move into the personnel and sit down with that union contract and have those discussions of what does this look like? Because we've had excellent discussion thus far. But if we know that we have an issue with that contract, should we not have those discussions before we fill all these empty voids and then have less flexibility in terms of what that looks like moving forward? I guess it's-
So the way we looked at that is that we hired or recommended for hire based upon the current union agreement. And so that's what we understood was our call, was to do that based upon current information. And that as the personnel committee or whomever does the negotiating makes those changes, then until such time as they do, the agreement that we had in front of us was the agreement that we had in front of us. And so it was certainly my understanding that the motion made by the board was to allow the committee to bring back recommendations, which I believe we did. And the letter of understanding, although, and because the contract is somewhat vague on that, particularly with the use of the word officers, and these people would not be officers, that we felt that the language was vague enough, I guess, that we needed to clean that up. And so that's what you see there. I guess I thought that we effectively had the green light.
Yeah, so the attorney said that we just needed something in writing. It's not so much that we're creating a position, it's the fact that there's no pay scale to go with it. So, that's what that letter of understanding does. It says that this individual will come in
Do
as
you
a
want me to
fire.
read it, just so everybody knows what it says?
Yeah, go ahead.
The Charter Township of Alpena and Local 1859 of the International Association of Firefighters, AFL-CIO, CLU, who are parties to the current labor agreement extended through June 30th, 2021. Parties agreed wages for the new firefighter classification will follow the wage schedule set forth in Article 7 of the parties' collective bargaining agreement.
So, and I don't know if you're aware, but to my knowledge, the union experience I have, all letters of understanding expire at the term of that contract. So every one of these letters of understanding that we have of this current agreement are gone, it's done. So,
And the other letter of understanding that Mr. Stevens signed is expiring on the 31st of next month. So as of the 31st of March, we can't even have the chief doing 24-hour unless Chris signs another.
correct, we're gonna have to, then we have to start negotiations, because we're gonna have to make a decision here.
So I think we need to start them ASAP,
Yep, I agree.
so maybe we can get everybody involved in those negotiations, set a date and start working on that. I don't want to wait till the last minute and have it.
I mean, there's a lot of work to be done. no matter
Right,
which
so
way
let's
we go
start
about
working on it.
I agree.
Chief, sorry, that was a little.
No, no, not at all.
Did you have more to address with the board, sir?
Well, if I can just get this all out of the way right now, we just covered where we were going with the new hires. My monthly report for January out of our station south would have been a total of 43 calls. So do you want a breakdown of those, or?
By all means.
Okay, for South Station 28 medical, one in Maple Ridge, 2 personal injury accidents, one in Maple Ridge, I'm talking village, so I'm not, 1 vehicle fire south, 7 service calls south, 1 Maple Ridge, 1 false alarm, 1 hazmat, which gives us our total of 43 for the month. The other thing I want to report to the board is I received a call from R&R, and they informed me that the chassis for the new engine should be complete and ready for inspection on March 3rd. And for your guys' edification, that the factory is based, that makes the chassis is based in Charlotte, just outside of Lansing. So somebody is going to make plans to go down and do an acceptance inspection for that. And then I believe I also already reported to you that we received the DNR grant for $3,500 toward wildland, i.e. turnout gear, PPE. So, yes, ma'am.
I'm glad you brought up about the new fire engine, because I have been bombarded lately with rumors that we canceled it, or that someone behind the board's back canceled the building of our new engine. So I did myself contact R&R Trucking to make sure it is still being built, and it is being built, and it currently has a July 8th completion date.
Yeah,
I don't know where that rumor started, that it
Well, and
was canceled when,
that's gonna be the next exercise, is the FAQs, but that was a beautiful segue, because.
yeah. Yeah, and my first was, I wonder if some people were maybe thinking about the RFP that had been written for the tanker that kind of fell by the wayside when the whole, so, but no, yeah, the engine, the chassis is near complete and will be ready for inspection. Once that's done, it will be shipped out west to the Smeel factory for the outfitting. So that's, and I was told they're looking at originally we were told, I believe September, late September. I was informed yesterday that they were looking at a just mid-July to late July delivery date.
Yeah, I just got this email yesterday, and it says July 8th completion. They
Okay.
say it can move sooner or later depending on snow days, the coronavirus, and, that kind of stuff. But I think
Okay.
it is sooner than we thought, because I thought it was supposed to be fall.
I was under that impression too, so I'm happy with that. Any other questions for me before I?
Any questions by the board for Chief Hunt? Yes, Russ.
I just wanted to comment. I think part of what you were doing was trying to help educate me, and I appreciate that, because I am new here. My evaluation, the comments I made were based on my evaluation. And I will tell you, and that's a question for the committee as a whole, is, with the 7 firefighter EMTs, did that contemplate BLS transfers? I didn't
We
think so.
tended to look, I think, more at medical first response than BLS. And hence the reason the comment that I made earlier about consideration to selling those ambulances, because we just wouldn't need them. And buying appropriate vehicles,
For first response, sure,
yeah,
yeah. Some sort of a ready vehicle with a
something,
cell in them or whatever.
yeah, Suburban or something like that.
So, I mean, anytime you feel I need more education, we can do that outside of a meeting too, so that we don't take up this. But I'm telling you what my evaluation has been, either as a citizen before I got here, and then since I've been here. And my thought is that, based on my look at historically and the budget as I've seen it, at best BLS transfers are a wash, and that's at best. They may be a loss to us overall.
What you're really referring to, I think, is non-emergency medical
Non-emergency,
transfer.
okay, maybe they're not.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm not talking about I'm talking
In
about
the-
the
yeah, that's all.
contractual basic transfers, long
Yeah,
distance or short term.
in at least my estimation, the only way that we could consider non-emergency medical transport is to completely revamp the way we did it. It would be my estimation, the township at very best broke even, at very best, and likely went backwards. And so a significant portion of the monies went towards payroll. It's just that simple.
And that's without consideration to the additional depreciation and so on a vehicle that.
Of course.
More quickly depreciates doing it. So, to me, that's off the table unless we want to staff for that, which is a whole different than that.
And to
becomes a
completely
business
revamp
model.
it. There are ways, through my research, there are ways that can be a worthwhile venture. But it's a very narrow way of doing business. But it can be accomplished, but that is a conversation for a much later date.
Right, and that's a volume kind of business that's more than what we've got. The other thing I wanted to mention, Dave, is you said we're spending more now on the department. Granted, we understand that, and there's more functions that are being done out of the department. But my overall question to all of you is, are we spending enough? And that's where we plan then for the future, is how do we do this? Either within the means we've got, or going to the people
And not to belabor it, but just so everybody's clear on my stance, both personally and professionally, if that's, I'm going to look at it in black and white and very simply, what does this department cost to run? And do we have that?
Well,
So-
yeah, and the other thing is, what does it cost to run the way we're doing it? And the other question is, are we funding it enough so we're not, I'm gonna be very blunt here, and people will be offended probably, but I don't want us to be a farm team for other departments. I want us to have staff that is trained enough, paid enough, that they're going to be willing to stay here. And there's more factors that go into that, I realize, in terms of structure and all of that. But, you know, so I think we have to set a plan and a realistic presentation to our citizens that talks about what does it talk, what do we get from longevity, and is that a goal? And if it is, then how do we achieve that? And there's a dollar sign attached to it.
Yeah.
Okay, that's all I had to say. That's my final comments on this, Mr. Supervisor.
Are there any other?
The only thing that I would add is I'd like to thank not only Chad, but Bev and Chris and Dave for putting as much time as they have on this. At this time, I'm not sure that the ad hoc committee needs to meet right now until such time as we know why we're going to meet again, unless the board feels otherwise. I don't know that we, right now, can take this much further, but that's just my thoughts.
I tend to agree with you, Trustee Lappin. It may be nice to have a little reprieve from your twice a week, 7 a.m. meetings. We can't say enough of show our gratitude and appreciation for the service work that you've done for us. And I think that's where we're kind of at this crux of, are we now to a point where we need to sit down as personnel and really start looking at the discussion and what that would look like, and then also bring in what is a 3, 5, 10, and a 20-year plan? Because I'm not of the mindset, even in troubled times, to rush into the next problem. If we can have a plan and discuss that, and then I think from what I've heard thus far is we're to the point where we need to sit down as a personnel committee with Mr. Stevens and start those conversations before we take any dramatic steps forward on that paper.
Right.
Is that the understanding of both ad hoc? I mean, because you're also a member of the personnel committee.
Yeah, I think we need to go in that direction. Like I said, I mean, this budget is what it is. 6 or 7 people will probably fit in there. It'll be pretty darn close. So it just is the cost of doing business at the current where we're at. So.
Well, it goes perfectly to segue to Mr. Esch's initial statements. We have a revenue problem and we have an expenditure problem.
Yeah.
So I think these continued conversations can probably highlight both ends of that spectrum a little bit more as we move forward.
May I just say then?
Yes, Mr.
To the two of you, not only thank you, but I hope, if that's what we're going to do here, is that you will still involve yourself in helping educate us and help us plan for how this fire department should be structured. Because I think you not only learned a lot, as you said, but you have a lot to add to what we're trying to put together, or put back together maybe, or put back together better, I hope, than obviously what we have right now. And right now we're in a dire situation, trying to fix it. But if we fix it with a poor foundation, so I think your help and input would help us, even though maybe the committee's not meeting at 7 o'clock in the morning, but if you would still be present at times when you can and add to our group thing here. Appreciate it.
Yes, Ms. Banks. Could I ask one favor, because we have a significant amount of business?
It's going to be quick.
Beautiful.
It's going to be quick. First, thank you, Russ. Thank you to everybody. What I would say is, seeing how far we have come with this, it's, my mama did not raise a quitter. So quite frankly, I will continue. And yes, if it meant 7 o'clock in the morning meetings, I would still do it, not happily. But I think that I would, from the public standpoint, encourage you to keep the ad hoc. It doesn't mean that it has to meet all the time. Do I agree with now turf to negotiations over there? That's not my purview. That I don't want that, okay? But do I think that as he even just said, that yes, we have a lot of knowledge, and Chad, I really appreciate your numbers game that you bring to the table. So I'll put it right back out there again. I would appreciate the ability and the honor to be able to still continue on the ad hoc committee and will continue to volunteer my time. And I think we should. It doesn't mean that we have to meet every
Yeah,
day, but I would encourage it.
Yeah, let me clarify. I think we've reached our point that we can reach right now. If we get into discussions where we need to consider, frankly, looking at a millage, then I think we need to broaden the committee a little bit into those people that have knowledge in those areas and that can help us establish a way to get to where we need to get. So that's what I meant by that. So yeah, this is just sort of this is just a timeout.
I knew that's kind of where you're coming from.
Okay, thank you.
But with that being said, we do have time, and we're going to be very quickly paced. But this is an opportunity because an educational component, which we've all agreed upon, which is central to any direction moving forward. So here's an opportunity to educate and maybe squash some of the miscommunication that is out in the public. And a big one that I would love, and I'll take the assistance of Michelle, after as the author that was posted on the fact book of the PSPHPR grant, since we're talking about grants and payroll reimbursement. I would like to impart some factual wisdom because there is a plethora of misinformation out there. So with the payroll reimbursement acronym is PSPHPR, which is CARES Act money. It is showing on the Department of Treasury's website of the potential of the prorated allocation of $92,272.57, which was posted on November 28th. The PSPHPR was actually filled out by myself with the assistance of Michelle. That was back in July. We received our first distribution and potentially only distribution in September. That distribution was for a total of $69,479 in a multitude of conversations with Duty Allen, Government Relations, UMTA, and Department of Treasury, and also a subcontracting group, which is now hired by Department of Treasury, the Raymond Group, to audit. What seems to be the case is the Department of Treasury has made promises and distributed more money than they had to send out. So in January, they hired a subcontractor to work for this fund, and they conducted an audit of which contradicted the original paperwork that was sent out on page 9. And this was actually the entire packet was part of the board packet back in, I believe it was in September. I have the meeting here. It was in the minutes of August 11th, and it had the entire expenditures. So I'm just trying to give some clarity, but it was discussed openly, and the entire packet that was submitted to the Department of Treasury was in that board packet.
Which included some DPW.
Yeah, and that's where so in the initial time, this was payroll, sorry about that, payroll reimbursement for public health and public safety. So at that time, in the initial application, our DPW employees were afforded under that guise, as were the fire members. We requested received. So we received 50% of what we requested. The issue now is, as I formerly mentioned, is that the Department of Treasury, unfortunately, distributed more monies than they had afforded. So they conducted this audit with the subcontractor in January. We had to resubmit, removing the DPW because they changed the parameters of that CARES Act money. So, which leaves us with the disparity of what we received and what their website states of a difference of $22,775.57. In my last conversation, as of Monday, I had with a member after 4 days, she called back from Department of Treasury. We really won't know. So right now, what is known is that everybody's looking at a fluid percentage across the state of a distribution of a percentage of 66.39%. That is fluid. So depending on what this audit finds and the redispersal of funds to the Department of Treasury, we either may have more money coming, but the reality is what we've received is probably all we will. So there is a disconnect between the Department of Treasury's website. And actually, if you go to that page that was posted, it will actually state a prorated amount. So it's always, the devil's always in the details. So what we did is we received one payment of $69,497. And do you want, that actually came to the general fund, and then Michelle, do you want?
It was automatically deposited into our general fund by the
Michelle,
state.
your mic.
So, the whole $69,497 was automatically deposited into our general fund by the state. When we looked at it, because it was based on water and public safety, we prorated it and put $17,791.23 into our water fund and $51,705.70 into the public safety fund. Since we have found out since then that the water fund is not eligible for it, we have moved that $17,791.23 into the public safety fund. So on our revenue and expenditure report, we have a line item called Other Federal Grants. It's line number 205-336-528.000, and it shows a total amount of $69,497.
So then to come back to that payroll reimbursement, and this goes to the education, it goes to the mistrust. Where did that money go to? What was, well, one, I would hope that the title says enough for itself, payroll reimbursement. That was to offset the payroll of the fire department for April and May. So in reality, the deficit number would actually be, without having received these monies, would be an additional $69,000 of labor expense that we've actually been able to recoup writing that grant. So to that point, Mr. Resch, have we written any significant grants? In this instance, I would say yes, I have, to the tune of nearly $70,000. Unfortunately, that state website states that we were given $92,000, which leads to the miscommunication and the breakdown of trust and poor education. So I wanted to make myself extremely clear, because that was one of the last big things of, you know, not only did we cancel a fire engine, but we're misappropriating payroll reimbursement. These are federal funds that are audited on a regular basis, quarterly. So I wanted to take that moment to clarify that rumor, because this, as I said, it's the propensity of miscommunication and false education that actually exacerbates that lack of trust. So we're doing everything in our power. Everything that we have thus far, even to the updated discussion that took place at the public input November 10th meeting, that is on our website. That is also, I believe, on the city's website. Anything that will come forward will be on our website, because communication is something that I think we all agree upon has been lacking. And we are doing our best. You know, it took a long time for the township to get to a position, as you painted that picture very succinctly, Jeff. it's gonna take some time to get out of that mindset. And this board has done over the past 4 years an exemplary. We're not perfect, we are human. But we're striving to make our community the best community.
Do we want to address the one about the turnout gear?
Oh, I'd love to. Let's dispel as many rumors out there as we can.
Chief, you were part of this discussion too. I've heard there's been a rumor that the city has stolen turnout gear for Bruce Huntington and Ken Piper. What is Dave? There was a rumor about stolen turnout gear, that the city stole it for Ken Piper and Bruce Honeycutt, and that is not what happened. There was a discussion that we said, yes, they could use the gear. And Chief, you're the one who explained to me how it's all custom fitted, but I just want to dispel that rumor that nobody has stolen any gear or equipment from the township.
And that's why there's some educational components to the agenda as it is, that you have before you, Ms. Banks. An educational component to describe, for general purposes, what differences are between licensures, so that people can actually formulate a foundation of getting away from an ambulance as an ambulance. And some of the email correspondences that directly correlate to some of the mistruths that are floating around there, because it doesn't do any justice for this municipality or a fire department to have a small contingent of individuals that are churning that discussion. And so as long as we can present fact will always outweigh an emotional or a false response. So it is our duty, and also my duty, to dispel that one at a time, and I will continue to do so. And I implore, because there are, after the initial thing, there has not been anybody that has called or emailed with concerns. And I know that there are, but people don't. It is always the vocal minority, not the quiet majority. So as long as we can allow ourselves to be adequately accessed, if you will, by members of the community, we're always going to be fighting a battle against a small front of miscommunication. So it is our duty as a board to defeat misinformation with that. Any other?
Those are the two big ones I have heard recently.
But they are in the board packet, so that's why we're just gonna, one at a time, as they come, just defeat those, because it doesn't do any good. But with that being said, because we are now not gonna have a lunch before we operate into the budget.
I have one question.
Yes, I only.
You might.
Chief Ward, what still?
Yeah, he's still here, I wonder if we should.
Is he? Are you back there?
Yep.
I just wanted to just get clarification on, whether you,
Yep. Yes, ma'am.
I just wanted to ask, just for clarification, because this rumor is out there as well. Do you feel that the city fire department is being run ragged for
No.
assisting our township?
No, not at all. Our deployment strategy is very, very dynamic because of our countywide role in providing paramedic service countywide and then fire and emergency services in the city. The extension to the North Station really has not changed anything except for where one crew is stationed. So no, I don't believe that's true at all.
Okay, thank you.
Chief, I have, I might as well just, as they come up, another rumor out there is that our north side, since we've started the contract with services, has been left vacant because of an auto aid agreement with Presque. Could you elaborate on that?
No, there is no auto aid agreement with Presqu'île, and Presqu'île runs medical calls. There hasn't been a fire in Presqu'île in some time, but Presqu'île runs medical calls, and we provide ambulance service to that area just like we do to all of the other areas. That's kind of a historical thing. Even though it's out of the county, we're still the closest ambulance. So no, there is no auto aid agreement there. As to the station being left abandoned, absolutely not. The only time that units are not in quarters here is if they are out for training which is the same as the township forces had done previously, or if they're out on an emergency call in the northern area, or if we pull them out on a long-distance ALS transfer, and if we do, then we backfill with another ambulance, with another ALS ambulance right away. So the area is always covered.
The auto aid agreement, is that, was that in place, and is it now no longer in place?
No, there's never been an automatic aid agreement with Presque Isle.
Okay.
We do have a management and response contract that if they had a fire and required response, we would respond. But fires are unusual for all of us. Medical calls are much more common. And at this point, Presque Isle has stepped up to the point that they don't require additional response for medical calls. In the very beginning, 5 years ago, they did, but they don't now.
Steve, you might be thinking of Maple Ridge.
No,
Oh, okay.
So then, if I can ask a question.
Mhm.
So then when you do an ambulance run, or do you do an ambulance run then into Presque Isle Township?
Yes.
So if you do that and they go up from the north side station, is that where this?
It could be, but that's not a real common, thing. The north side ambulance, the one that's assigned to this station, covers Maple Ridge, it covers Presque Isle, and it covers the north half of Alpena Township for primary 911 response. So yes, they could be in Maple Ridge or they could be in Presque Isle, but only for emergency calls, which are shorter duration. If there's any delay whatsoever, then we backfill with a unit from headquarters. Sorry, the mask makes it tough.
Since we are here, are there any other questions
Well, I-
or things that we've heard?
Well, Chief Forbush, I think, had a report that he was gonna give down in the reports, but I don't know if he wants to.
Well, I
should
think
keep
we
it-
can accelerate through new business items 1 and 2 in a very steadfast manner. And that leads us to, by all means, Michelle, let's just move to new item business
if,
1.
if I may, if the ad hoc committee wants to go grab some lunch or something like that,
Yeah.
I encourage you to do so.
Yes.
Eat enough for all of us, thank you.
Michelle.
Administrative Assistant Clerk's Office, after I've done 2 interviews with a couple of people, Laura sat in on the first interview with me, Nathan on the second. We've done a background check, we have called references. The person I would like to hire is Haley Birmingham, so I would like to make a motion to proceed with hiring Haley Birmingham for the administrative assistant position in the clerk's office.
Are you making, we have a motion on the table and support. Further discussion? Seeing none?
I guess I want to add to my motion, it's contingent upon the physical and drug screening.
Okay,
And discussion,
and discussion.
I would just, this is time for Michelle to have, help in her office, and she's doing a great job staying afloat as long as she can, and I think Haley will be a huge asset to our township and to our job.
Any further discussion? Roll call vote.
Trustee Reiner?
Yes.
Trustee Foley?
Yes.
Trustee Lappin?
Yes.
Clerk Palovich, yes. Treasurer Ellery Summers?
Yes.
Trustee Kroll,
Yes.
Supervisor Skibby?
Yes. Moving forward, to the second item of new business, the introduction of proposed ordinance 146. Mr. Golden, would you like just to give a brief introduction?
Sure, this is a revocable, non-exclusive franchise submitted by Presque Isle Electric and Gas Co-op, and it's their intention to broaden their scope of business to include broadband communication. They've approached 3 of my other municipal clients with identical franchise ordinances after we received yours, and all are on board. I did have contact with Tom Sobek from the company too. The 30-year limit, that comes from the Michigan Constitution. The fact that it's non-exclusive and revocable, that comes from the Michigan Constitution. There's nothing out of the ordinary in this franchise ordinance, so I'm recommending that you adopt it. And today, because you're a charter township, it'd be a motion to introduce this proposed ordinance number 146.
Tim, I had one question.
Okay?
In section 9, it has language that I highlighted only because I wanted to ask you about it. It says all other franchises, ordinances, and resolutions and parts thereof which conflict with any of the terms of this franchise are hereby rescinded to the extent of such conflict. And I'm sure we have franchises with other entities. And although this is not exclusive, does that language in any way cause concern for us in terms of our relationship or ordinances that we've allowed to go through with
No, I see
other
your point.
entities?
I'm sure it was aimed at any prior franchises with Presque Electric and Gas, but I can add that language because I've got the Word document. So section 9 could be changed to all other franchises, ordinance, and resolutions and parts thereof pertaining to PIE and G.
I think that would be better. I think it just is otherwise too broad.
Sure.
That is a beautiful point of clarification, Trustee Reiner. With that being said, I'll entertain a motion to introduce ordinance 146 as amended in section 9 for Trustee Reiner's comments. Is there a
Yeah, that
motion?
is, I guess that's a motion to make it with the amendment, yes. Okay. I make that.
We have a motion on the table. Is there support?
Support.
It's been moved and supported. Any further discussion? Seeing none, roll call, please.
Trustee Foley?
Yes.
Trustee Lappin?
Yes.
Clerk Palovich, yes. Treasurer Ellery Summers?
Yes.
Trustee Kroll,
Yes.
Trustee Reiner?
Yes.
Supervisor Skibby?
Yes.
I'll just add one thing. So this will be on the agenda for the next meeting for adoption, and I'll remind Michelle.
Yep. Thank you very much. And then you also do talk with Lynn to make sure that it's on the website.
Yep, I'll do all that too.
Thank you very much, Mr. Gold. Department reports at this point in time, with 10 people per, I would ask politely if one individual would be able to stretch their legs so that Chief Morbush can come in to give his department report in full. End of the hall to the right, sir.
Thank you very much. I just have a brief report for you on the project, the process and progress that we've made at the Northside project over the past month or so. Just getting started there and trying to help out during this situation. The North Station at this point is staffed with one city lieutenant, captain, or senior firefighter with Fire Officer 2 certification. All of them are paramedics. And one city firefighter, paramedic, or firefighter EMT with expertise in fire engine operations to be able to act as a fire engine operator. There's always a senior officer on duty at the city station as well, so this is the second officer on shift, or if there's overtime, maybe the third. These are the two apparatus being used at the North Station at this point, an ALS ambulance and a city engine. The reason that we went with the city engine was because our personnel are more familiar with it, they're more comfortable with it, and it's in a little bit newer and a little bit better shape than Township Engine 3, which was a DNR vehicle. Township Engine 3 and Township Bravo 3 are being stored at the city station, so they're in and out of the weather and so forth. That was another rumor that went around. Our deployment strategy is using the closest ALS unit to EMS runs. The north side is faster to some of the city, never slower. The echo or rescue from the city is sent on high acuity calls to assist the north side ambulance. So that assistance is usually the city rescue. Sometimes it's a second Alpha unit. And there has been some paid-on-call first response as well from the township, and we certainly appreciate that. So it's deployed to our EMS calls up here in the north side. As far as fires, the north side does respond to fires in the city as they would otherwise in mutual aid. Some, but not all, city-based personnel and apparatus respond to north side fires. There has been one that I'll report on. Backfill is always used as necessary to maintain appropriate staffing levels in all areas. And when this presentation was originally written, paid-on-call was kind of an unknown commodity, but we're starting to get a handle on that and have a better idea of what resources are available in that regard. In the first month of operation, we did 48 EMS runs during January, no fire calls in January. The majority of those did require advanced life support care. A few required ALS-2 care, which is a higher level, and the smaller green slice is BLS, where although received an ALS response, only BLS care was required for that particular patient. As far as the kinds of problems that you see, these are the runs by primary indicator during January of 21. You'll see the largest is difficulty breathing or shortness of breath, which may or may not be related to COVID symptoms in some cases, but really nothing else terribly notable. One thing we did find very notable, and you can't quite make out the numbers there, but the really big one is older folks, 65 or over, and the next one is the 10 years prior to that, which is not surprising. That's the primary demographic of our entire area, not only the township, but the city and the county as well. There are a number of response metrics that need to be looked at when you're measuring the effectiveness of an emergency response system, and only one of those metrics is response time. That can throw you off sometimes. But even though it's only one of them, response time to the north has been faster than response time to north calls from city headquarters, as was pointed out. City responses are unchanged because their units are still coming from the city headquarters. And this actually has been a helpful thing for countywide response because the north unit is closer to some of the north county as well. And so in a big picture kind of situation, this has been a blessing in a couple of different ways. We are sending 2 firefighter EMS providers rather than 1, so your staffing has doubled essentially. And we're sending ALS rather than BLS, but up to 4 minutes faster from the North Station. So that really has been an excellent thing for your community and for the county as a whole. I would like to talk a little bit about training because training is so incredibly important. In 2020, the Alpena Fire Department logged 4,500 man-hours of training, and that has been made possible by a full-time training officer that we've never had before, and it has made a tremendous difference in our organization. In January of 21, the department logged 258 man-hours, and a lot of the training that we did in January was really focused on new roles or enhanced roles caused by the township project. Even though it's a temporary project, we want to make sure to do an excellent job. So we spent a lot of time on drafting from static water supplies and pump operations and those kinds of things that aren't as much of an issue in the city as they are in the township. But that is definitely where we're focusing training opportunities. A lot of time spent on tanker shuttle operations, how to operate your tanker, and we've learned a lot with the portable pumps and the apparatus that you have. And the township tanker is still stationed at the north side, and we've been using it to train with and to respond with. It obviously is available for both sides as needed. This is just 2 of our units on Weiss Road at the dry hydrant, drafting water and then flowing it back across the bridge and kind of going through those repetitively every shift for several days so that you get the muscle memory going, you get used to that, and you're faster at it if you need it. Drop tanks are not something that the city normally uses, but we've been able to do a lot of training on it. We're much more comfortable with it at this point. All firefighters are trained in them when you get firefighter 1 or 2 certification, but that obviously you're best at what you do most. And if that isn't what you do most, then we train more for low frequency, high risk events. Cow Island is the only area of the city that is not hydranted, and so it has been helpful to train there as well. There's a couple of our folks working with our mini pumper. It actually pumps 1,500 gallons a minute and drafts very effectively, and it fits into some small areas that work well in rural areas. We've also spent a lot of time on ice rescue capabilities. During this temporary staffing contract, we have responsibility for about half a Long Lake or so, a third of it, in Alpena Township. And so we take that responsibility very seriously. We're working with our Presque Isle Township partners who are very well equipped and trained at ice rescue, and together make a pretty good response for those kinds of things. That again is on Weiss Road, a training opportunity that we did. Deploying the rapid deployment craft or banana boat. You have one, we have one. We have one at this point that is carried on, there are ice rescue suits and ropes carried on the north ambulance, so that if the first unit in was that ambulance, they could at least get a line out and a rescuer out before anybody else arrived. Obviously, additional resources would be coming simultaneously from Presque and city headquarters with additional response capabilities, but that first ambulance has the suits and the ropes that are needed to get started. We had a very, very famous dog rescue in your district a little bit earlier. Hit national and international news. I'm not sure quite how that happened, but the point is that in this case, it was a husky. It well could have been a person, probably would have been had we not gone and got the husky. Somebody would have. And it worked very, very, very well. And in that case, we had, I believe, next slide as a matter of fact, we had 10 city professional firefighters on scene. From the time of call to 911 to the time that the dog was safely on the shore was 22 minutes. And we were very proud of that operation, and I think it speaks a lot to what would have been had there been a person there. But it's a very happy dog, and he's very, very in good shape now. There's been one fire during our time just after the January statistics. February 3rd at 6:18 p.m., we were dispatched to a storage building fire, something bigger than a shed and smaller than a garage. On Bernice Street, on first alarm response, we sent the two guys from the north side station, paid on call from the north side, or responding from home, but assigned to the north side station, personnel from the city station, and a tanker automatically from Presque. That is automatic, is tanker response. All told, we had 9 AFD career personnel on scene, 2 ATFD paid on call, and they did an awesome job. They brought your tanker and worked with us very well, and certainly appreciated that. We also had 2 volunteers from Presque there helping us out. During that time, Murphy's Law, I suppose, there were several EMS runs throughout the county. You had a whole flurry of calls all at the same time. All of those were handled during the fire operation without any delay to any of the calls. Like I say, we deploy very dynamically. In terms of township paid-on-call support, some time ago, we sent a letter to all of the folks on the roster that Chief Robbins has shared with me, along with some information from the Everyone Goes Home program, because I want to take every opportunity to educate folks and enhance firefighter safety. We're doing a meeting here tomorrow night to coordinate efforts and communicate and make sure we're all on the same page. We have set aside some EMS equipment that the city's put together. There's an orange kit on the floor there that's an example of that. We've issued 2 of those already to ATFD volunteer first responders so that they are appropriately equipped to respond directly to the scene in their personally owned vehicles and back up the career staff coming from your station. We've had 4 paid-on calls respond to higher acuity calls. Although the City Rescue or ALS Echo Unit also responds to high acuity calls in the township to absolutely guarantee that there are enough people for CPR or whatever the case may be. 7 people have indicated an interest in responding during the temporary staffing project with various levels of availability, including Tom Tolan, Amanda Tolan, John Capeless, Garrett Mead, Matt Klimchek, Tim Muggy, and Matt Benedict. And so hopefully they'll be able to join us tomorrow night, and we'll go over procedures and ways that we can work together maximally effectively. Although it isn't part of our contractual agreement, I just can't hold our CRR guy back. He's just determined to help any way he can. So our community risk reduction fellow has been doing free smoke detector and carbon monoxide detector installs in Northside and really throughout our entire county. Home safety visits on request, and one of the things that I really like about his CRR program is that he follows up with residents in need of further support. If we're on an EMS call and we run across an elderly person that doesn't have the support systems that they need to take care of themselves, he can follow up on their safety needs and refer to other agencies or whatever is necessary to close that loop. Andy Marceau, of course, is who I'm talking about. He's a member of my prevention. He's also on the State Fire Safety Board, appointed by Governor Whitmer. And we're very proud to have him, and I'm happy to have him here in your north area also during this temporary program. So a recap, just for the first 30 days, we've had an aggressive training on high-risk, low-profile, or low-frequency operations. We've done a great deal of station cleaning and refitting and making sure that everything's just right and as efficient as we can possibly be. We're using proximity dispatch, closest unit goes, which is really a little bit of a change for us because we serve the whole county from city headquarters. And the Echo was a move into that. Our Echo units stationed in the far west end of the county, Long Rapids or Wilson. But this is the first time that we've sent ambulances from multiple locations, and that's been very helpful, I think. We've been doing some apparatus refitting as needed for maximum rural firefighting efficiency, a number of adapters and hoses and what have you that need to be used to be compatible with your other apparatus in your service area. Any costs that we've incurred are more than covered by the fee, so we're not worried about that. But we have, I believe, in my opinion anyway, been provided an enhanced service to both communities by simply deploying the same existing resources from two different locations. Now, obviously, I'm not an expert, but I feel like it's going really well. I'd be open to any questions that any of you might have.
Are there any questions for Chief Corbin?
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. And we also have in our packets, an F&B report. Sit back. Our F&B operations have both their December and January report in there. We will be sitting down, I will be sitting down with Kat yet this week to really make sure that we're looking at our CIP in that enterprise fund, that we have funding mechanisms and how to budget accordingly moving into this proposed budget. So that will be another budget date that will be forthcoming.
If anybody has any questions about that, the reports, Mark is in the back and you can get him.
Yeah, by all means. I'm trying to keep this a little bit succinct since we do have a closed session on this agenda as well. Yeah, he's not here.
I'm just getting hungry. And you weren't worried about
With
hangry.
that being said, we have a discussion that needs to be brought forth. It was the amendment to the new business, so it's the planning commission. Any would like to discuss that with the board?
As a liaison to the planning commission from the township board, there was discussion last night, it's been talked about earlier about getting a recording type of secretary so that the board member can actually do the function of being on the board. And we lost a lady, a person that was doing a great job of doing that, but she had to resign, I believe, because of health issues. So we're looking and would like to know if the board would consider this person to be hired and also going to be put into the budget. So it's for conversation.
Just for conversation, is it something that one of the administrative assistants here could do and maybe work those hours?
And
What's their
that's,
schedule of it instead of hiring another person?
All we ask is for a person, we don't care where it comes from.
yeah. And so as the acting secretary at last night's planning commission, that's what I mentioned, that we'd have to post it internally under the FOPLC contract to see if anybody would like or have those conversations.
Somebody's job responsibilities?
It could be, but it also still has to be posted as such as, it wouldn't have to be a new, it's a different dynamic of their job function between the 8 hours of operation of 8 and 5. So
Can we use the restroom before we go?
Let's make a motion and then you
I'll
can
raise you.
Do we have to make a motion to go to the bathroom?
up our sewer bill. Is there a motion?
I'll make that motion.
Closed session to discuss this.
Support.
We have a motion and support. Any further discussion? Seeing none, a roll call.
Trustee Mack?
Yes.
Treasurer Elder, yes. Treasurer Elder Summers?
Yes.
Trustee Kroll,
Yes.
Trustee Reiner?
Yes.
Trustee
What
Foley?
time is it?
Thank you.
Supervisor Stevens, or Trustee Foley?
Yes.